Alina and Craig Smoke.
Baylor men's basketball next game home against TCU. They're in the top 20. Baylor now 19th in the country. TCU 17th. Baylor losing in Ames on Saturday. And after a very nice start, Pat Nunley, color analyst, Baylor Radio, former Baylor guard, joins us on 365 Sports with Craig Paul, and I'm David Smoke. Pat, what is wrong? Is it overreacting to say that Baylor basketball has some problems?
Well, maybe it's an overreaction. I think it's just the ebbs and flows of a difficult schedule, a team that's not as old as it might seem to be. I mean, you got really young guys playing key positions for this team. But I think the biggest area of concern is defense. I mean, this time last year, Baylor was 13th in the nation in adjusted defensive efficiency. Now they're 45th in the country. And that's just not Baylor basketball. I mean, over the last 3 years, really, I think the hallmark of the team has been its ability to get stops when it absolutely has to. And when you play Baylor, it's going to be physical. You're going to have a hard time not only scoring, but getting into your offense and running your stuff. And that really has not been the case for Baylor in the first, 13 games of the year. And I think that's a little alarming. That's the biggest red flag, I think, right now.
Where do you think that stems from? Because Scott Drew, I mean, even going back further than 3 years, it has done a very good job of building people up through the system. And even if you're, a red shirt or a guy who hasn't played that much, you know how things work. But this team hasn't seemed to grab onto that.
Yeah, and I think you really nailed it, Paul. I mean, it's just it's the guys that were playing for us over the last 2-3 years lead defensively. Davion Mitchell, the best defender in the country, hands down, not even close. Mark Vidal right behind him. Jonathan Chumwa-Chachua was the co-defensive player of the year last year, and he only played through February. So, you've got guys that know how to do it, have a heart for it, understand the importance of it. The Big 12 is a defensive league, and there's some teams that can really score. But if you ask any coach in the league, the keys in any game are rebounding and defense. You got to make it hard for other teams to score on you, and the Bears just have not been able to do that. The reasons for that, I think, are, again, what you just kind of chronicled there, Paul, but I think it's also just understanding that you're just not going to win in this league when you can't get key stops. Even in a game that might end in the 70s, high 70s or 80s, the championship teams get stops when they have to.
Pat, what are your impressions of TJ Otzelberger and the job he's done already at Iowa State?
I think it's terrific. A year ago, they were number 8 in the country when Baylor and Iowa State played the first game of conference. Both teams are 12-0. They were 8th in the country, and Baylor knocked them off. And then they, 2.5 weeks later, they went from number 8 to out of the top 25. By the end of the year, he had them in the Sweet 16. And this year, I don't think they're as talented as they were a year ago, but man, they get after you. I mean, they play so hard that they are always going to have a chance. And then the recruiting class that he's bringing in that we got a glimpse of when we were doing all the pregame stuff for the game on Saturday is really, really impressive. I think he is a perfect fit for Iowa State. He was there as an assistant, went away to UNLV, I guess it was, worked his way back. And right now he's got them going. They're overachieving, and they're going to take their lumps in conference. But I think he is the perfect fit for Iowa State basketball.
Pat, there are some fans, of course, who cover or not cover, but love Baylor basketball, and Scott Drew they trust, and Scott Drew we trust. I've seen that before. Do you see where they're going to have to make some changes as far as can they move some people around, or is that just basically just rearranging the furniture?
That's a good question. I think, number one, they need to get Cryer back. He's just snake bit. I mean, he missed 13 of the last 14 games of the season last year, missed a game with a sore back. Now he's in concussion protocol. I don't know that he'll play Wednesday. You just got to get him on the floor. I mean, Baylor has beaten the number 8 team and the number 10 team in the country, UCLA and Gonzaga. And so they're capable. But when they beat UCLA, Flagler and Cryer combined for 50. And against Gonzaga, they found a way to really defend what was the best offensive team in the country at the time, held them to 63 points. So they're quite capable. I think it's stay the course. It's get Cryer back on the floor. I think it's also continue the accelerated development of Josh Ojanwuna, because he's the I think I've said this before. He's the heir apparent to Chachua, but he's 2 inches taller. And he's a little bigger. He's hard to believe, but he's maybe a little more athletic. But he's only played 3 years, so I don't think you make changes. I think you get Cryer back on the floor and you accelerate Ojanwuna. And at some point, Jalen Bridges is going to start making some shots. And when that happens, and it's going to happen because he's a career, 42, 43% three-point shooter. And when all that comes together, this team is going to be really, really good. And they're 10-3 right now. So, back to your first question, David, I think it might be a bit of an overreaction. I think you just stay the course.
Keontae George, obviously the story of the year when it comes to newcomers because he is such an electric scorer. We were talking about him before the show, Pat, and one of the things I think maturity-wise, and maybe you can back me up here, is he's going to learn to play defense eventually at some point in his life, and he does well at times. But in a game like yesterday where he misses his first 7 shots, and he's probably in his head about why aren't those 7 shots falling, a guy like Davion Mitchell, a guy like Jared Butler, a guy like Maceo Teague said, okay, well, if I'm going to miss my first 7, the guy that I'm guarding is also going to do that. So it's a net zero. I don't know if Keontae George, and it's probably because he's 18 years old, doesn't know that yet.
I think that's a really good point. The progression from high school to college, I don't care how good you are, it's tough, particularly now that, you moved into the Big 12. This is not AAU ball. I mean, this is just different. This isn't pretty ball. This is, you got to score, and man, can he score, and you have to defend, and he can defend. I mean, I've been pleasantly surprised at how willing he is to share the ball, what a really good teammate he is, and when he really leans into it, he's a good defender. I saw something the other day that I think it's true, that great passers can defend really well because great passers anticipate the game so well. And he is a great passer. Well, to play defense well, you have to anticipate. And he's got that gene, so he can do it, and I think he will. I think maybe sometimes, back to your point, Paul, I think it's a little bit of immaturity. Sometimes maybe lack of offense affects his defense. But he can play it, and he's a great kid. I think he's a really good teammate. So he'll learn that. But that was a bit of a rude awakening on Saturday. It was really sort of, for those guys that haven't experienced it, it was welcome to the 12.
Yeah, and you're right, and it doesn't get any easier with TCU coming to town and what they've done last year. Of course, they made the great run too, and there is no chance to get your head above water if you get below water, is there?
No, well, you got to win at home, and Baylor has 2 games at home this week: Wednesday, TCU, Kansas State, Saturday. But it's not. I mean, it's never easy. And it's not only is it not easy, it is incredibly difficult to win a game. I mean, look at what happened across the league Saturday. Every game is a 1 or 2 possession game. K-State, West Virginia overtime. The only double-digit win was Iowa State over Baylor. And so you got TCU coming in here. They've won 10 in a row, and they are number 17 in the country. This is the first time, by the way, in the series history between these two teams, and they played a ton of games, where each team is ranked in the top 20. So it's going to be a war. It really is. And this is finally, I think this is the second consecutive game, first time all season for TCU that they've had the same starting lineup back-to-back games. The ball was out. Miles was out with a hand injury or some sort of injury. And now they've got everybody back together. They won 10 in a row, and they are rolling.
You mentioned Kansas State Saturday. How emotional will that be with Coach Tang?
Yeah, I know it will be for me. It's going to be just weird to see him in a lavender shirt coaching another team. But I'll tell you, I'm elated for him, and he's doing the job that everybody expected that he would do. And everybody, I think Baylor Nation is elated for him. Now, we're going to give him a big high five before the game, and then hopefully we win by 20. but he's energized that program. I remember watching those guys last year, towards the end of the year, watching K-State, and they didn't look like they were having any fun. And they were talented, but the sizzle was gone. Well, Coach Tang, as you would completely expect him to do, has re-energized that program. And he's got them playing really well. They're 1-0 in the league. They won overtime at home. And he's going to be coming in both barrels loaded really on Saturday. But both teams have an important week and both teams have important games before K-State and Baylor match up on Saturday.
Yeah, TCU coming up on Wednesday. And that's a team that, a couple years ago, that was a coach that I think a lot of people thought Jamie Dixon had kind of run his course in Fort Worth and was maybe looking to step out the door, and now they are very much the last 2 years reinvigorated and a tough out for anybody any day.
Yeah, they have reinvigorated, and I think they've had some injuries along the way. And most people don't understand how difficult it is to take over a program and, like Coach Dixon has done, and put his stamp on it. They're now playing, like, defensively, they're playing Pittsburgh basketball. I mean, it is physical. They beat you up. They're hard to score on. And that really wasn't the culture of TCU basketball when he got there. So he's got guys, he's got maturity, he's got experience now, and he's been able to get those guys playing the way he's always coached teams to play. And, here he is, however many years into his career, and that team is 12-1, and they are rolling. They've got a lot of momentum, and they're, just like we are, really excited for the opportunity on Wednesday. But the stakes are high. Think about that. The stakes are incredibly high Wednesday for both teams. We're 2 games into the Big 12 race.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, Pat, thank you very much. We appreciate your knowledge. Pat Nunley, Baylor radio color analyst for men's basketball, former Baylor guard. Baylor with